Okay, I have a guest with me today. I have Meagan Johnson. She is a filmmaker and she also does a lot of improv. How are you doing, Meagan?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. This is great. Um, so
Totally.
first question, where are you from?
So I was born in Dallas, Texas, and then I grew up in Atlanta,
Oh,
Georgia.
oh
Mm-hmm.
wow.
Yep,
So you
certified
saw
Southern girl.
the whole expansion of Atlanta before your eyes, right?
Sure. I think, I might have I was living in the suburbs like south of Atlanta, so I would drive in to work. I used to work at Lenox Mall, so I would drive in to Atlanta a little bit, but I don't think I was like, right I think I might have even gone to college before it started to really expand and blow up because a bunch
Mm.
of my friends, I always said like I'm never going to move back to Atlanta. And then in recent years, a bunch of my friends have moved back to Atlanta from like different parts of Georgia. And I'll go visit them and I'm like, okay, like it's kind of nice here. I kind of like Grant Park. Like they didn't have this when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now you're in Savannah. So why Savannah?
So I moved here originally. So we were talking before that I was a page at NBC. I was finishing
Yeah.
up my 2-year contract. And my contract actually ended March 13th, 2020. So the best time in the last
Oh
century to have
wow.
a contract end. Um, and I was interviewing for Warner Brothers that morning to be an executive assistant in one of their development houses. And I was like all set to go. I've done like the perfect page track, ready to go. And then they called me that afternoon and they said there's a hiring freeze across the entire company. And that kind of filtered throughout every single studio, had these hiring freezes that first month of where the pandemic was really bad. So my lease was also ending at that time, and I decided to move back home to Georgia. I got back together with my ex, as we all did in the pandemic. And he was going to medical school in Augusta. So I spent most of the pandemic in Augusta. And then he got selected for a regional program in Savannah. And like at this point, I thought I had given up comedy. I thought I had given up film and entertainment. I was studying for the LSAT and thinking I might go to law school.
Oh
And
really? Oh wow.
yeah, and I moved to Savannah with him, just being like, well, I don't have anything else going for me. Like, I like this little beach town. It's a cute small town. And then when I moved to Savannah, pretty quickly I started working with the Front Porch Improv, which is a little improv theater here in town. It's one of the most successful small town improv theaters in the country. And I started working with them, and I was so lucky because John and Bree are the two creative directors there, and I really feel like they mentored me through learning how to freelance. I watched them
Oh
really hustle to get these paid gigs for their actors. They really wanted their actors to be able to be paid for the work they did. So they always paid us for acting in shows and things like that. You could also bartend. I learned how to do the tech booth and all the kind of like brick and mortar theater things. But then what was so cool to watch is the way they hustled for these private opportunities. We did corporate workshops, and then also they flew this guy out, who Joseph Spinoza. He's a PhD from Baltimore, and he developed this trauma informed youth curriculum for improv. They flew him down, and they got all of these actors trained as instructors in this curriculum called trauma drama. And so then from there, we could go to schools and YMCAs and anywhere where young people were underserved in the community, and we would get grant funding or private donor funding to basically instruct these kids in improv games, with the goal being to like expand their emotional intelligence, give them tools for collaborating with others. It was such a timely program because we're coming off of the pandemic and kids were just getting back into schools. And so we were doing a lot of things of like learning to make eye contact and read like verbal cues on your friends' faces, and learning to read
wow.
body cues and things like that. So I started freelancing through this improv theater, And that was such a, and also like John would get me these gigs of being able to like host New Year's Eve parties and things like that. Just if John saw a need for improv, which there kind of always is for a live event, he would get us in there to host or play games or do something. So it really taught me. I think before that, freelancing seemed like such a scary thing to me. Like, how do you possibly like find clients, especially in like a small town? And I think
Yeah.
what John and Bree and also their co-owners are Dan and Dolly, what they really taught me is if you are out in your community and you're like working with members of the community, you don't necessarily have to be going to these networking events, although those are great too. But if you're out grabbing lunch at a cafe and you're just chatting up the people who work at the cafe, sometimes that leads to a gig that like you would have never known that this person was going to host a New Year's Eve party and
Yeah.
things like, and of course that's so like relevant to independent filmmaking too. Like all of the locations I've ever shot in were donated for free by my friends, including 208 Wine Bar did me a huge solid and let me shoot in this beautiful wine bar for them and for a spec ad I was doing for Tiffany and Co. And I met Chrissy, the owner of the wine bar, because I was emceeing a private New Year's Eve show for her. And she just had such a great time, and her friends had such a great time vibing with all these improvisers and watching the private show that we just ended up collaborating with each other on a number of things. So yeah, and then we have a trolley tour called Savannah for Morons that Dan and John developed and wrote together, and that was like the main consistent gig that they got me locked into, which was giving these 90-minute comedy trolley history tours around Savannah. So just cobbled together all of those things in Savannah. And long story
Wow.
short, that ex, love him, miss him very much. He went on to Michigan and he's doing great. He's doing residency in Michigan. But when he left, I was like, I have to stay in Savannah. Like I'm getting to do everything I ever dreamed of doing in LA here in Savannah. So
So
yeah.
now we're talking about also the front porch acts, right? That was the
Front Porch
community.
Act, yeah, that's their youth outreach program.
Okay. So backtracking a little bit,
Hmm.
where did you go to school?
So I went to Florida State. I studied English
Oh,
there.
okay, cool.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
English major.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I'm really good at speaking English.
So you're a reader.
Yeah, I think at that time, people always ask me, like, what did you think you were going to do with an English major? And I think I was hoping to be some sort of like Eve Babbitt's, like, kind of journalistic, Joan Didion, maybe be a journalist, but you're also a writer.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, the publishing landscape had changed so much by the time I graduated that that just really wasn't like a lifestyle that existed anymore. Um, so I did lots of different things. I taught English as a second language, and things like that. But I
Yeah.
think, I always wanted to be a writer. I always loved writing, and there was something. It was like in college, what I didn't expect to get so much perspective on was I ended up taking a lot of literature classes. And those were really the things that were most helpful for my writing because we would read these excerpts of classic literature and these great authors from the 1900s and things like that. And that was like the time in my life where I really started to develop my perspective on politics and religion, the patriarchy, all of those things.
Mm.
Everything that they fear about college making you a liberal. That's what happened to me. Um, and, um, and but it was really, I remember in one of my early literature classes, they taught us about the bombings that happened in Tulsa on Black Wall Street in, I believe, the early 1900s. And
Oh,
that was something that was never taught to me in high school at all. And it just completely shifted my worldview of growing up in a small town. Um, and the curriculum they were asked to teach versus going to Florida State and kind of like going back over all of this history and all of this literature that I had some context for, but these teachers were given a lot, or these professors were given a lot more leeway to really give us primary sources and delve into different things. And I think that really just shifted my perspective of how important it is to seek out your own learning and how important it is to be really intentional about the literature that you're seeking out and reading for sure. It really changes the way you think.
Was let me ask this. When you why do you think that subject is not taught more in high school? Like
Like
what you were
Black
talking about,
history specifically, or kind
Black
of
history,
social movements? Yeah.
social movements and things. I mean, that seems to be the cultural taboo that's starting to begin now, is to
It's scary.
gloss over this stuff. Do you think it just because it provokes thought?
Well, I do think, from talking to people I know that are teachers, teachers are public school, high school, middle school teachers are so under-resourced as far as like the time. They're given these curriculums that they have to teach, and there's really no time outside of class for them to go past the curriculum that they're given by the state. And I mean, I really feel for people that have to write curriculum because you really are distilling
Yeah.
such complex and dynamic human history into these bullet points, and how do you do that in a way that honors the kids and honors the teachers? So I'm there's definitely like political reasons. I think there's also this kind of idea that maybe like younger people um shouldn't be exposed to these like more violent aspects of humanity and stuff. I think that that is maybe a piece of it, but I also think that teachers just need way more resources for sure to
Mm,
be able to teach a curriculum that's really reflective of human history for sure.
yeah. Because it seems like
Yeah.
they're just kind of forced to like, here's the curriculum, here's the book, go through it, teach 20 kids.
Right. And
So,
and also you're teaching all these kids that when I was a English as a second language teacher, the hardest part being in a classroom of like 30 I was teaching adults at the time, but being in a classroom of 30 adults is everyone is at a completely different skill level, at a completely different motivation level for their learning. And really the more that you can this is like pretty evidence based, the more that you can stratify groups into
mhm,
um, these people are having more trouble with the curriculum, if you can really have the teacher focus with them, and then if you have more intermediate and then you have a more advanced group, um, which there's of course also like uh, it's not that easy because there's also like racist history with that type of stratifying in schools,
yeah,
but kids really benefit so much from attention that's individualized to their learning and their learning
yeah,
curve. And in order to do that, you need money and you need lots of teachers and you need lots of time. And I think it's unfortunately what it feels like to me in this country is like learning and scholarship is just like deprioritized and deprioritized more and more every year. And,
yeah,
we spend an ungodly amount of money on military advancements. And I mean, I've always I think on a microcosm, like with individual people, your budget really reflects your priorities in life, but also as a country as well. Like we could say we prioritize education, but that's not what the budget reflects. And that's
yeah.
so unfortunate.
Pentagon failed 7 audits. What does that say?
Horrifying. Horrifying. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're going to a time period now where it's a suppression of them, and that's what, and trying to suppress it at a younger age so that when they get older, they don't question things. I don't know if it's the system
Which
that's doing that or if they're actually deciding like Is it that like diabolical? Like they're sitting there going, if we take this way, this will this will make them
Yeah,
all.
I think there are some individuals that are that diabolical. I mean, for sure, but I also, from like working with and talking to educators, it's also just like such a massively disorganized bureaucratic system that
Yeah.
you know, decisions about curriculum are not necessarily being made with a lot of intentionality, and that's, naturally going to lead to suppression of information. And I think, there have been I one of my favorite writers is Octavia Butler, and I think she's been warning us since the 80s that information and the distribution of the information is really what dictates what happens to us as a species, and it's one of the
Yeah.
most powerful things that we can take control of. And it's such an interesting time with AI because I think, when we think about like the robot revolution or whatever, all of us saw iRobot, and that's like what we
Yeah.
picture, robots in the streets with guns, like fighting or whatever. But I really think what's so terrifying about AI is that the most powerful social movements have been spurred on by writing and by the distribution of information. And if AI gets to a point where they can write articles and generate articles that we don't necessarily register as AI, then I think
Yeah.
the power is really in the hands of the AI to move people in all sorts of directions.
Are you familiar with the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard? I'm butchering his name, but he wrote the book called Simulacra and Simulation, which was one of the
Oh,
bases for. Okay, you know what I'm
I'm
talking
I'm
about.
not I'm not super familiar with him, but I do know about a little bit about this philosophy. Yes.
Yeah, and it's the
Yeah.
idea that the destruction of meaning, and he believes that after JFK, that pretty much we've every president has been somewhat of the same since then, and that if you kind of destroy meaning, you destroy kind of like the point. Um,
Mhm.
is that? I mean, it sounds so insidious, but like, is that like where? Do you think it's just where technology is going and we're just not keeping up, or do you think it is like people are plotting this and are seeing this and this has like been decided on? This is the thing I always got to go back on, is like, is this a decision to destroy meaning, or is this just what's happening because technology is going so fast? AI, we're about to have like godlike technology, and
Mhm.
most people can't even sit through a 2-hour movie without pulling out their phone.
Yeah. Well, I do personally. I don't want to. I would say, like, in many senses, I love AI. Like, AI is one of my favorite technological developments. I use Chat GPT all the time. She's helping me plan my vision board for 2025, and it's so
Oh, that's so
helpful.
cool. I
Yeah,
didn't even think about that.
I took all my goals that I wrote down and I was like, "Can you break these down into actionable steps?" And she did. And it was so helpful. And like, it's not perfect, but it also
Yeah.
gave me like all these resources. I've been researching like graduate schools, and I've been trying to compare like graduate schools versus just taking like independent film workshops, and which is going to get me further. And like, I've been exposed to all these online resources for teaching myself film just from asking Chat GPT. So I think the endurance of machines that humans don't have, like they don't have to sleep, they can sift through
Yeah.
mountains of information so quickly, like that is so awesome. I do think that we've seen previously that technology is kind of always a reflection of the humanity that created it. And so I think while we live in a patriarchal, heteronormative, racist society, and while those people are really the ones funding this technological development, it's always going to reflect their philosophies and their worldviews. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think, it really, um, I just could never like disparage AI and say that AI is
Yeah.
going to be evil, because it really feels like, okay, that the AI is learning off of the information that we put on the internet, and they're learning off of our behaviors and our worldviews. And so if it is going to a scary place, I really feel like that's a huge reflection of where we're at with humanity. Um, and I think that's also why it's so important to make education in STEM fields so accessible to underserved groups in the community, because when it's all white rich guys that are programming the computers, then you have
Yeah.
all sorts of horrible issues that come up
Yeah.
with that for sure. And it again, it's such a reflection of the society we're in.
Yeah. I mean, George Lucas talked about that. He said, AI is going to go bad because we made it bad, not
Mhm.
because it didn't. And I thought that was an interesting, because
Damn,
he's
he just
always
said what
looked at,
I said in a single
yeah.
sentence. That was a perfect summary. That's
um,
exactly what I'm saying.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, if
Mhm.
you look at his films, like, look at C3PO and R2D2, these are not bad machines. They're kind of almost annoying at times.
Mhm.
He sees them as working alongside us. I think that's kind of where we need to go. Like, if I get a line in like a script that I find is not working well in my tongue, I'll take that line and I'll put it into Chat GPT and say, write me a tongue twister so that I can get used to
Oh,
saying
that's
those
such a good
words.
use for that. I love
Yeah,
that.
and it works so well, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, now it's there." Now, it's like so this idea to, like, just demonize, AI, I think is the wrong move. It's just like, how are we gonna go about it? How are we gonna walk with this technology?
Mhm.
Are we going to use it as a tool, or are we gonna use it to just, replace everything, and we'll just be tubs of goo?
Oh,
Like in
for
Wally.
sure. I think that's such a valid fear that we have for sure, is if we're not using this technology intentionally, if we're not developing it intentionally, then it really is so quick
Yeah,
to spiral out of our control for sure.
yeah.
So,
I mean, the
yeah.
the fear I have is now it's kind of an arms race. Like,
Mhm.
one of the things I found out about, when Oppenheimer came out, I was like, oh, got to go and find out all about this stuff. It's like originally, FDR wanted to release it to the United Nations and have it be kind of like a decision we all make. And
Mhm.
we kind of went against it and just like, no. Well, the next president, he wanted to put his mark and, be the guy that ends World War II. I don't know that for a fact, but I know human nature, and it's like I can just, FDR did all these great things. How am I going to stand up to? Oh, I ended World War II with the atomic bomb, but that started the nuclear arms race because now everybody's like, well, now I want to make one, and now I want to make one, and
Mhm.
I feel like now we're kind of with that with AI because now every country is like, well, we want to get to the next version of AI. That's the
Mhm.
only scary thing is like if like a Russia gets there before us and it's just like, well, who cares? We don't need any safeguards. Just do whatever.
Yeah. No, totally. I get that for sure, because I mean,
Yeah,
I think that is when we start to have discussions about slowing down and making more laws around AI that are helpful to
yeah,
society. I think the talking point that everyone always has is, well, what about Russia? Aren't we scared of Russia?
yeah. See, they like to
And
use that boogeyman thing. It's just like, well, we got to do this, and it's like, but that can go on forever. Eventually, somebody has to say, here's what I like. What your idea was to let's bring in more people. Let's bring in more.
mhm,
Let's not just have the same programmers doing this. Let's have different voices in the room so that it it doesn't just learn, like you said, an autocratic way of thinking or a capitalistic way of thinking.
mhm.
Sorry, I interrupted you there, but I had to get
No, no,
that
no, totally. That's
out.
exactly, well, that was the thought I had with Oppenheimer as well, and with the atomic bomb was, okay, well, if society is set up in such a way that most of us would like to take this to the United Nations, but
Yeah,
one guy's power trip means that this is now an arms race, I think we have to,
yeah,
at a certain point, like, I think our hopefully our generation, maybe the next one,
yeah,
but I think at a certain point we have to treat not just the symptoms, but the original issue, which is that the people that get voted into power and given nuclear codes do not make decisions based on what is popular in society at all. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I think the stat for pro-choice is like 70% of at
Yeah.
least 70%, maybe higher, of the country is in favor of abortion under at least some circumstances. And then you have
Yeah.
lawmakers that don't make laws based on what the popular feeling at the time is. And so, how did we give them this power in the first place? Maybe it's not our fault. Maybe we didn't set this up this way. But
Yeah.
if we're so
Yeah.
unhappy with it, can we restructure society? You
Yeah.
know?
How do we take democracy and restructure it in a way so that it actually reflects the service of the people? Because I think you brought up a point. It's like so much. Now we're getting into the big problem, which is money and politics. Okay, so tell me, which came first, a love for comedy or a love for film?
So, first, it would have been a love for comedy.
Mm,
I've done live comedy for the past 10 years now or so. I started out I think how it all started was when I was in high school, I would listen to Pete Holmes's podcast, and he would
mm,
have all these comedians on. And in high school, I think a huge escape for me was watching comedy specials. Like I think that was kind of the height of the comedy special being really high quality.
mm,
And all these amazing comedians were being put on streaming services, and so that was a huge escape for me, was being able to watch an hour of John Mulaney telling jokes when things were not super easy for me in high school. And so um I got really into listening to Pete Holmes's podcast. That was a huge escape for me. And the thing that I noticed over and over, because I had been thinking about how do you become a stand-up comedian? What's the career trajectory for that? And over, they would talk about how they joined these improv groups in college. And so when I was at Florida State, going into my second year, I had really not found a group of people that I felt like I connected with at all. And I searched up like improv Florida State, and I found this group called No Bears Allowed, which was our on campus, our college improv group. and um, and so I found No Bears Allowed, and I was lucky because when I came into their group, we had just had a bunch of seniors go to Chicago to Improv Olympics and taken
mm,
intensives at IO. And so when they came back, they really structured, like we had our performance team, and then we had our like level 2 team, and then we had our, Saturday drop-ins, and it was very much structured similarly to how an improv business is run.
mm,
And at the same time, they also had just come off of these intensives, and they had so much valuable knowledge about how you make improv good. One of the first people that was a huge mentor to me, her name was Sophia Ambra, and she was the first person that ever said the phrase "play with love" to me. And
mm.
I did improv in college. I did UCB out in LA, and then I did the Front Porch here.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've seen a lot of different iterations of improv theaters. I took an intensive at the Annoyance, and I've seen a lot of different philosophies on how to do good improv. But you know, I think what I always come back to, what makes the most compelling scenes, is that play with love principle, in the sense of, and like, not like even in like a ooey gooey way. It's
Yeah.
more like people are interested when you're interested. And so when someone walks into a scene and they're like, "Oh, I'm just like buttering this sandwich," if you as their scene partner make that sandwich so important, people add in all this context from their lives and they project onto the scene and that kind of thing. And so much of like the experience of humanity is in these tiny little mundane things that we do on a day to day. In many ways, like the way that you make your sandwich is some of the most interesting
Yeah.
behaviors that you do, because you have your little ritual that comes from your human experience.
Yeah.
And so I was really introduced to that philosophy by Sophia. And I
Mm.
remember I walked into my first little drop-in workshop and I was so nervous. And she came right up to me and she was like, I've never seen you around here before. What's your name? And she was so friendly and so warm.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went out to LA where it's a little bit of a different culture. I mean, everyone's just like jaded at that point, like doing comedy all the time. And, you kind of lose some of that warm effervescence.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I came back to Savannah and came to the Front Porch, a huge, huge piece of their business model is making the audience feel valued and loved and respected. Like the
Yeah.
moment you walk into their front doors, the bartenders are waving at you.
Yeah.
They're offering you free drinks. If it's your birthday, they all know it's your birthday. And I've done like over 10,000 hours of like hosting and live comedy at this point, and I've noticed over and over whenever I'm doing a hosting gig and I'm just chatting with the people at the private party beforehand or something like that, everyone is so terrified of comedians. Like I'll be just chatting with a girl at a corporate gig and asking, "Oh, like what do you like about doing social media?" And always without fail, they're like, "Don't make this part of your set. Don't make this like a bit. Don't okay, if I tell you this, please don't like make fun of me for it." And people are so afraid of comedians making fun of them, especially like in crowd work. I think from
Yeah.
like 90s and 2000s comedians doing this crowd work that is like punching down and just like criticizing the audience member that came to your show and paid money and
Yeah.
filled a seat for you. And what I loved about watching John and Bree host at the Front Porch is when they do crowd work, it's like the audience member is always in on the joke with them. They're never making
Yeah.
a joke at the audience member's expense. It's like they're
Yeah.
together enjoying and valuing each other's company. And it just makes the experience for the audience so much better. And people want to come back and they want to write you these great reviews because you made them feel special and warm and you made them feel like there's a community. Um, so I did comedy in all those different respects for about 10 years up till now, and I still do the Savannah for Morons tour now and host around town and stuff. But 2 years ago, I got into filmmaking, and it was really born out of I was producing a lot of live comedy shows. I produced this show with my friend Deshawn called Mom, Can You Come Pick Me Up? And we had two live shows that we did, and I produced those. And some of the people at the theater that were involved in film saw the way that I produced, and I think they were like, "Oh, she could be a filmmaker because she has that attention to detail." So I was really lucky because I had friends that kind of took me aside and said, "Do you want to be a filmmaker? Do you want to be a director?" And I at at the point that one of my friends asked me, "Do you want to be a director?" I had never thought about that word before in my entire life because it felt so far. I was pursuing stand-up comedy, and
Yeah.
somehow being a director felt way out of the realm of possibilities. Um, and but as soon as someone asked me directly, "Do you want to be a director?" It's like it all came together for me. Like every experience I had had leading up to that point, everything I had been good at naturally. I love teaching myself software, and um, whenever I was sad and lonely in LA, the first thing I would do is take myself to a movie and go see a movie by myself. That's like one of my favorite ways to self-soothe. And so it was like, the lens came into focus, and I was like, I finally, from all this confidence I had from doing comedy, was able to say, yeah, I think I do, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky. I found this like group of guys that all did production that brought me on, and I would co-direct with them or I would production design for them. And like production design is the best way to be on a set teaching yourself how to direct, because you're always in the room where the scene is happening. You're not necessarily busy in the way that you're not busy during the take necessarily, unless you're doing some real janky PD, which that also happens too. But unless you're pulling fishing line or something. But I was lucky because this group of guys basically that were doing their own production comedy sketch thing, they would invite me onto their sets and I could just observe. And I was helping them out with PD, but I was mostly just being a sponge to how a film set was run. And the two guys that I feel like I owe my entire filmmaking career to are Trevor Hardin and Eddie Tucker, who they run a production studio called Hardin Creative in Bluffton. And they were fans of the improv theater, the Front Porch. And I had co-written a script called Bottom Shelf Wine Connoisseurs. And we sent it to Trevor Hardin. And Trevor said he was on board to help us produce it. Eddie Tucker DP'd it. And they, for free, provided me with all of this gear that I never should have been able to touch as a first-time director. I got to shoot my directorial debut on a red camera, on a red Gemini. Nobody gets that. And not even just the red Gemini. Eddie Tucker is one of the most talented DPs I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some really talented DPs, but he is one of those guys that just lights in a way that is so cinematic and so expensive and luxurious looking. And that was really the vision that I had for this comedy film, is because I felt like the sketch comedy that I grew up on, it's never like beautiful to watch. Like it's funny, but they don't really think about making it beautiful for the audience too. And I never would have been able to achieve such like a beautiful, luxurious look without Eddie DPing that. And they were so patient with me. Like I didn't know anything about filmmaking at this point. I didn't know what a dolly in was at this point. And I was shooting on a red.
Like I just needed. Can you take that train tracks thing and put that move it?
Well,
dolly in.
You know what I told him? Eddie looked at me. I think about this literally every day. This like keeps me up at night. Eddie, when we did our location scout meeting, he looked at me and he said, "Are we shooting this all handheld?" And I said, "Yeah, all handheld," confidently. And thank God this man was in the military. So like he is one of the most ripped, strong men that I've ever worked with. So thank God for him. But I didn't even know that you could use a tripod for some of the shots we were doing. Like
So he actually did everything handheld?
He did that entire short film handheld. I think about it all the time because, again, this is like such a professional DP.
Man, you're mean. You're mean.
I put him through it, and I would never do that to a DP now. Like one day,
the whole movie's handheld.
One day, like when I make it, the first person that I need to send like a gift basket to is Eddie Tucker, because that man did so much for me. I do wish that maybe one of the people in the room had stepped in and been like, "Hey, we don't actually have to do this handheld."
We don't have to do. But we have the tripod. We also have the steady. We have the steady cam. We can do a couple of things.
There's so much.
Wow, man, you're mean.
So that
he must hate you.
On that night, man. But the thing about it is that Trevor and Eddie were so experienced, and they were so willing to work with someone like me who had no experience. I'm completely self-taught because of people like that who were just patient with me and allowed me to make mistakes. And directing is self-teaching directing is terrifying, because the only way to do it is to fail miserably in front of a crew of 30 people over and over
Yeah.
and over.
Yeah.
It is, you have to not even have
I'm
a
surprised you didn't,
capacity.
since you didn't know anything, you didn't go, oh, so I'm gonna hold the camera, right?
Well, the other thing is, I did not realize the scale of the gear because you can
Yeah.
imagine they told me, "Hey, we're gonna bring the red camera and we're gonna bring these
Yeah,
lighting
that's
rigs and stuff,"
great.
and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, great, great, great," and
Man,
I I
most people
fully
get like a cannon.
I I fully expected like a cannon on like a handheld gimbal. That's what I was
No,
picturing.
no,
And then
it's
when we get there
huge.
the day of, when we get to the location the day of, and the camera team starts unloading all the gear from the truck, I had to, because the whole piece of this was me just like faking it till I made it. So I had to
Yeah.
act like I expected all of this gear to be there.
Yes, of course.
And
This gear.
of
Put that over there.
course.
Uh, that's a
Yeah,
C
they're like, "Where
stand.
do you want to set up Video Village?" And I'm like, "Oh, right here, sir." What
Yeah, put
Video
set it
Village? Yeah.
right here. Don't you want it like closer to the set? No, this is perfect. This is
Yeah,
another
yeah,
restaurant.
yeah. So that was my first time directing, and I also got I directing has been a series of me getting lucky because I worked with
Yeah,
them.
that's awesome.
I was also working with another production studio that was helping me out then, and but Trevor and Eddie were such like allies in this whole thing. Like I
Wow.
as I continued down that path of directing, you can imagine I was so green and I was working with a lot of men, and I got manipulated and condescended to, put in really dangerous situations multiple times,
Yeah.
being on these crews that were entirely men.
Yeah.
And Trevor and Eddie were so much the opposite of that. Like they were so patient with me, and they were so
I thought Trevor and
able.
Eddie were the first one, right? They were your first.
Yeah. So they were
Oh,
the
but
first ones I worked with, and then I
oh, the
kept,
next one.
continuing, and then I would production design for a lot of
Okay.
student films, and also and I was working with them a
They're in a van
lot.
down by the river.
And their crews were entirely men. And so everything I was learning really on in film was all at the hands of
Man,
like truly I was the only woman on set for like my first two or three films that I after
yeah.
that film I directed. And then I got so lucky because I met this girl, Grace Pritchard, who she's now graduated. She was a SCAD student. And
Hmm.
she and I met through like a series of, just like small town, we would see each other around. And she had started a production studio called Garden House Cinema. And we met because I really wanted to find like a way to meet other women in film. I think I had an intuitive feeling that there was another way to make films than what
Hmm.
I was doing with these all male crews.
Then one girl and 30 men in your
Yeah,
show.
literally. And and since because so Garden House Cinemas, their whole
Mm.
philosophy is being very woman forward and very queer forward. So then I hop onto Grace's set, and Grace's set is entirely women and non-binary people, and there's one guy that's like ACing or something. And when I
That's
tell
rough.
you that the culture, and I'm sure like you being on sets, the culture
Yeah.
and the temperature of intensity was just taken down like
Yeah.
10 notches. Like it really felt like on those earlier sets,
Yeah.
everything felt life or death. And then you get to this set where, she was at least like 7 or 8 years younger than some of those male directors I was working with. And
Mm.
the way that she was able to run a set and make sure everyone knew, hey, we're not saving lives here. Like, we would like to
Yeah.
make a beautiful film, but at the end of the day, like, we're all here to enjoy ourselves, to feel creatively fulfilled, and to do our work. And she really showed me this entirely different modality of filmmaking, which I think leaves so much room for every department to be so much more creative and to be so
Yeah.
much more caring in their work. And her I
Giving
through Grace.
space, letting people do the job that you hired them to.
And like it's okay. Like if someone messes up, let's say there's like a boom in the shot, it felt
Yeah.
like those earlier directors would be like yelling at the person for getting a
Yeah.
boom in the shot, and now they're shaking with the boom and they don't want to make any.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and there's a way that what I loved about Grace is she would always say, "Hey buddy, hey, do you mind if we could just get the boom out of the shot?" And I
Yeah.
think sometimes like
Yeah.
that scene when you're first starting out directing and you're a woman, you don't want to be seen as weak. And so it almost feels like very weak. But when
Yeah.
you're a woman and you're first starting out directing, you really don't want to be seen as weak. And it's very terrifying to feel vulnerable. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunately kind of conflated in this society that like being polite and kind can sometimes be misconstrued as
Yeah.
weakness. But then just being able to watch Grace direct, and then her AD, who's another one of my best friends, Abigail. This is the other thing. Abigail, so every other AD that I'd worked with previously, so I had worked with ADs previous. The only ADs I'd worked with previously were men, and they were very stereotypically.
This is like Saturday Night Live. I was going to mention something about the Saturday Night Live as you're talking about the guys, and you saw how the union guys were in Saturday Night, right? In that movie,
Yeah, totally.
where
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they're
yeah,
like,
for
it's
sure.
like he's doing all this stuff, and they're just, yeah, we'll get to it. It's not our
Yeah,
job, so who cares? Keep
yeah,
laying the bricks out there, you know.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Because you mentioned like it's like because you that's how guys run on that ship like that. They'll just be like everything is just like they almost forget that it's supposed to be art. They just kind of are
Right.
very they get into that procedural process.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about Terrence Malick's set is there's not really a script, there's not really anything. He just tells the actors to go and improv, and that becomes a scene. And it can be
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
monotonous at times, but it's an interesting style. And his camera crew is so good that like they don't even have to block anything. They'll just follow him and they'll completely keep
Ugh,
themselves out of the shot. But I know exactly what you're talking about. I was on a set where
yeah.
the cinematographer and the director were and I was just like, can I have another take? I think I can do. He wouldn't give me another take. He said, well, the cinematographer doesn't think we need. I'm like, okay, so I'm nothing. Like he was basically the cinematographer running the whole damn thing, and he was very
Sure.
procedural. There was no trying, and it's like you got to have that procedural process to it, but you also have to have the play around, the
Right.
space so that people
Yeah.
can try things. It's
Well, and
not.
I think
Yeah,
the what a lot of directors don't realize is, and why I started talking about Abigail was,
yeah, yeah,
so Grace is this amazing director, but her AD is one of our best friends, Abigail, and you have this like image of what an AD is supposed to be like they're kind of pitted out like to be like the most dudes on set, they're yelling at everyone about the time and they're rushing everyone.
yeah,
And Abigail has this way of ADing. I've never seen anyone else be able to do it where she can just like
yeah,
I've worked with her in different capacities as an AD, and she can almost like get you to do what needs to be done just with like eye contact or with like a specific look. And
yeah,
I will never forget I was doing PD for a spec ad that Grace was directing, and we were doing these like cool like Oppenheimer type like the sparkly
yeah,
particle type shots. And I really wanted we ran out of Alka-Seltzer, but it looked so good in the shot, and I really 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 wanted to get more Alka-Seltzer. And I looked at Abigail and I was like, do I have time to run to CVS right now and get some more Alka-Seltzer while the camera team's setting up? And she looked at me and she goes, girl, if it's what the shot needs, yeah,
yeah,
you got time. And
yeah,
um talking to her about it later, she looked around the room and she assessed in that moment, okay, they're going to take at least 30 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
CVS is 10 minutes away. Like she had all this stuff going through her
Yeah.
brain, but the way that she conveyed it to me was this sort of like, it it was so gentle, and it like inspired me. It like lit a fire under my
Yeah.
ass. I was like, oh my God, I have it. Like, she's going to let me do it. Whereas like a lot of ADs, I think in that moment would have been like, you don't have enough Alka-Seltzer. Like we of
Yeah.
course we don't have time, yada, yada. And like
That,
she had the art as the priority. If it gives us a beautiful shot, then hell yeah, go get the Alka-Seltzer.
have you ever heard that story of what was it? James Cameron was doing Aliens, and over there the crew didn't really take him seriously because he was a very young director, and like
Hmm.
if as soon as it became like tea time, they would just stop everything and just drop everything, so I know what you mean with the with the AD, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's very important to work with people that you trust and have
Hmm.
that camaraderie, because then you're right, you don't even really have to say much because we're all thinking the same thing, we're all doing that thing. Yeah. Yeah, you got time. Like just that
Totally.
almost mind reading thing, because it almost becomes like a not well, I guess this is a good option of like a hive mind mentality, because we're all working toward
Hmm.
the same thing, but that idea, and you just hire anybody. Like David Fincher said, that was the mistake he made on Alien 3, is he worked with 20th Century Fox people instead of working with the people he knew, who he
Right.
trusted, you
Totally.
know.
Because once you've like worked with people like Garden
Yeah.
House, we had worked on, 4 or 5 sets together over the last year. And so Garden House was mainly, it was Grace Pritchard that founded it, Abigail Cunningham, Kaylee Beam was our DP, and then I would also write, direct, and do production design. And the four of us, by like our fifth set together, like truly we could just exchange a look with each other and we knew
Yeah.
what needed to happen. And then oftentimes we didn't even have to ask each other. Like, I remember I was directing my spec ad, and it was my first like solo directing project,
Hmm.
and all everyone's unloading the gear from the car and everything. And I remember I look over at Grace, who was the producer on set, and she was pulling the crafty out of the boxes and making it look really aesthetic and nice for the crew to like come pick up their snacks. And I remember having the thought of like, thank God that I didn't have to ask someone to do that. Like, she just knew
Yeah.
intuitively the crew is going to eat better today if you pull the things out of the boxes and you make it look like
Yeah.
they're allowed to stuff. And that's such a small, like, she did so many other larger things helping me produce that, but I think it was, I in that moment I felt so like loved and cared for by her, because she was making sure that these tiny little things didn't fall through the cracks. And that's so important, to have crew around you that's looking out for, okay, what's going to fall through the cracks right now.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've been on set where, they've had somebody and it's just like, what exactly do you do? You know? Whereas,
Right.
you've got somebody there who just is like, this will look better this way. This will look better. And that's why I think it's so important
Right.
for everybody to kind of share in the vision of what
Right.
of what you're doing, so that, we can get it, as opposed to what I think happens in a lot of sets is, you just got people that are just there to, punch a clock. And it's like filming is just not one of those things you can just punch a clock. We get it when we get it, we don't know.
Mhm.
There's everything's working against us, the sunlight, time, but so I love though that she did that. She saw that and she was like, this will work better this way. You didn't have to tell her
Yeah.
that. It and
It's just
that's
like a level of an
yeah,
emotional intelligence that when you work with people you trust, it really leaves so much extra room for everyone to be creative and for everyone to be artistic.
yeah,
And yeah, when you really feel like you trust the people around you, it is such a game changer for the amount of creativity that you can have on those sets, and for like the type of art you can make. And I always think it's so interesting how in many ways all the departments in a film are working against each other, but
yeah,
also they're of course collaborating, but there's so many times where like it would be so much better if we could have the sound mixer over here, but if we
Yeah.
have the sound mixer over here, then we can't shoot this way. And it
Right.
really does feel like you're walking in this kind of tightrope with each other. And I think it really comes down to the attitude that people have towards each other. And that's why I think, the more like women and underrepresented groups that we have in film, the more we can have these types of film sets where the temperature
True.
is just so much lower, the intensity is so much lower, and we're all here with the hope that we're going to have a good time. We don't have to be martyrs to get the shot. We
Yeah.
can actually enjoy this process and also get a beautiful
Yeah.
shot. And so I feel so lucky that I met that group of women at the time that I did, because I do think I was
Yeah.
going down a path of directing that ultimately I would have had to unlearn a lot of those things and those qualities that I was taking on because I thought it would make me look stronger to a room full of
Yeah.
men. And I think watching Grace, especially, I remember the first time I watched her direct because so vividly because of how kind she was to her entire crew while still she's very attention to detailed, and she always gets the shot that she wants, but she does it in a way that's so kind and compassionate to everyone. And I think having that example set for me, it completely shifted my perspective on what directing could even be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you like to direct that.
Oh, that's my favorite part. That's like
All right.
that's the part that comes naturally. Um, I think, it comes really naturally to me because I did improv for so long and I did live theater for so long. So I think have I have so much respect for actors because I'm not a trained actor. I've acted in a few things, but I know the difference between me and a trained actor, and I have so much respect for the amount of work they put in. And there's tons of directors that have said this before, but you can have the red camera and the beautiful lighting setup and the best cinematographer in the world, and if you call action and there's not a good performance, everyone feels like their time was wasted, like
Yeah.
everyone. And on the flip side of that, when you have an actor that really knows how to have a good attitude on set and how to show up really prepared
Yeah.
and how to take notes really quickly, it really inspires. You can watch all the grips and ACs and everything will work faster and more passionately as soon as they see that the actors are good.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, I like to experiment since I'm like such a new filmmaker. I try to experiment differently every film with how I'm prepping. Like when I did Bottom Shelf Wine Connoisseurs, I remember my two leads, Fernando and Sophia, I had them over to my apartment and we did like a table read in my apartment. I gave them a few notes and that was about it. Then the second time I directed, I decided that I wanted to get on location for the table read. But I really wanted the actors to be able to feel out the space and
Mm.
feel out where the camera was going to be, because I think it's kind of like um a part that gets looked over with directing the actors is like if you put them in the location beforehand and you tell them where the camera is going to be beforehand, they can really do such better preparation.
Yeah.
And if they know it's going to be a really tight close up, they're going to prepare so differently than if it were a wide shot. And I
Yeah.
think the like most cruel thing you could do for an actor is like have them prepping like it's gonna be a wide shot and then you're only tight in on
You're
their
like,
eye
oh,
or
we're
something,
going on
you
your eye.
know? Yeah. So I really like to give the actors as much of the shooting plan and the camera plans and the location context. I like to give them all that context beforehand so they can use it while they prepare. Um,
Yeah.
And I've also worked with a range of I've worked with sets that were all improv comedians and were not trained actors, and then I've worked on sets that were trained actors. And I mean, it's always such a blessing to work with a trained actor. They come with this level of preparation that really makes your job so easy as a director. But on the flip side, working with improv comedians is also great too, because they're able to really take these notes and flip their performance on a dime in a
Yeah.
way that not necessarily every actor can do. Um, so I love to just, I think like so much of directing is failing forward. And I think like my favorite thing to do with actors is every production I'm trying to think of, okay, what haven't I thought of with preparing these actors or working with these actors? What could I try differently this time? Um, and I also think it's so this is so fun for me because I am a host and a comedian and I do live comedy. So I'm always thinking about the way that you say things, like completely changes the meaning of them, the specific words that you use. Like if I'm going to give an actor an adjective, like, oh, can you say this with despair? Can you say this with excitement or whatever? The adjective that I use, I'm going to be like really, really, really intentional about it because just those tiny words that you use with actors when you give them notes between takes, that's all they have to go off of. So they're really latching on to the specific words you use. So you have to be really intentional with the way that you're communicating to them. And you can't say, I want you to look like you're awe inspired when I really want you to look delighted, because those are two completely different performances for an actor.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really fun for me to give notes between takes to the actors because I think it's what comes the most naturally to me, like being kind of a theater kid and growing up on comedy. I feel much more in tune with the way that the actors are thinking than the way that the
Mm.
cinematographers are thinking, because that's something that I've had to teach myself over the last couple of years is cinematography. Whereas like it just feels like such a natural symbiosis for me to work with actors. And it's also it's another piece on set where I just watch the things that they're able to do and the choices that they make, and I'm like and, I'm usually a writer director, so I've usually written the words, and I've had so many moments where I was like, "Okay, I wasn't even hearing the delivery that way, but I love the way that you interpreted
Yeah.
that, with your own life experience." Um, and I do think the other thing too is, you we were talking earlier about how you would use chat gpt to give you a tongue twister when you can't say the
Yeah.
line correctly, but I think the other thing too is being really open to how does it come naturally out of the actor's mouth. Like if it's a couple words different than what you wrote down on the script but it feels natural to the
Yeah.
actor, I always think that's like a conceit worth making, because
Yeah.
and that also comes from stand-up comedy, I think too. Like I cannot tell the same joke that my colleague could tell because we don't look the same, we don't have the same
Yeah.
voice, we don't have the same cadence. And so I think casting is so important because once you've gotten past casting your actors, it's really about trusting them with the work that you've given them. And it's really about trusting them to make choices that feel natural to the character they're embodying. And
Yeah.
it's one of the most satisfying things for me on set, when I've written something down and I watch an actor deliver it in a way that I did not imagine, but it just sounds so much better than I could have ever fathomed, you know?
Yeah. For
Yeah.
for me, as an actor, I like to be as relaxed as I possibly can be. The more relaxed I can
Mhm.
be, the more I can just go into any other place, because when you're
Mhm.
relaxed, that's when you're gonna cry. That's when you're just your natural emotion is just gonna come. So for
Mm.
me, it's always been about that. And then knowing the words. I'm kind of a stickler for the words, like whatever you've written, I try to get that down. But I'm also somebody that can if you want me to improv it, I can improv it too. I can do both. I make it so that I
Yeah.
can do both. Is one of the ways that I'll learn the lines is this is kind of more British style training, but like I'll say the line, then I'll say the line with a different intention, you know, of there. So
Mm,
it's like,
mhm, mhm,
I like you. I like you. I like
mhm,
you, you know, so I'm
mhm,
saying it there. Then I'll say like a different voice or whatever. I've been watching The
mhm,
Penguin for a while, for a little bit, you know, so now, so I'm like, I'll do, I'll do Colin Farrell's voice, like, I like you. I like you. I like, you know, do it, you know, just doing it, you know, over and over
Yeah.
again to get it in there. Because I went through a period where I would learn lines, you know, through note cards, doing the line thing that I found was just what Bill Nye said, you know, just say it 18 times, move on to the next line, go back, say it. And
Mhm,
that's what I've been doing. And it's just been giving me such freedom. But for me, it's just about, you know, so like if you've written it a certain way, I will, you know, try and get it. And if I can't say it, I'll go to, you know, a tongue twister and be like, there's something here about it so that it feels as comfortable in my mouth, you know, so
mhm,
because you just want it to go, because the best place for the actor to be is in that place where I don't know if the lines are going to come out. You know, it's like
mhm,
Pavarotti said, I don't know if I can sing that high note. If I get to this time frame of like where I don't know where it's going to go, that's like the best place, because then it's just going to be natural. Because when you talk to other people, you're not thinking about, that's the thing, knowing the lines and saying that you know the lines, but then being able to perceive and act as if you don't know the lines, you know, it
mhm.
comes into the real art of it, is trying to just find it so that it just rolls off off your mouth, so that you can already be doing it. It doesn't really matter what I'm saying. It's very set into the Meisner. But all I was adding is that, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
I like your approach that you're doing, and I like the fact that you're set is relaxed. And it's true, when the actor starts, you know, ramping it up and starts doing a good job, it brings everything, it brings everything up, because it's just like it's going to set the
Totally,
tempo. Because if this isn't
totally.
good, then, you know, it's like, what do we have? We just have a pretty picture.
Right, and the performance can really take you out of it, no matter how pretty is, no matter how
Yeah,
good it sounds, like, the
yeah,
performance is so key to being able to, like, get into that flow state, so,
yeah.
um, I and the
I love
other
what you
thing
said, flow
too.
state.
Yeah, and the other thing
Yeah,
too about, I think that directors, I had to learn as a director to keep in mind with the actors, and this is something I learned from acting on other people's sets, is as an
mm,
actor, in many cases, you're just sitting there watching as the camera team is setting things up, as the lighting team is setting things up, and most actors are really empathetic people. So they're really taking on the energy and the emotion of the people that are around them. And so
yeah,
if you
it is.
have this really high temperature, high intensity set, where you're
Yeah,
yelling at people and everyone's mad at each other, I don't care like how amazing of an actor you are, you're going to like take in that energy and you're going to
yeah,
feel that tension. And like exactly what you're saying, I think the best acting comes from the actors being able to be
yeah,
relaxed, and so I think, it all is like this symbiotic thing that you really have to keep in mind. You might think that you're having like a little quarrel with your DP off to the side and no one
yeah.
knows, but
But it's
the
felt.
actors,
It's all, everybody feels it.
they can feel it for sure, for sure.
Was Vanya on 42nd Street, or is it 34th Street? That's Julianne Moore did that play. They were doing Uncle Vanya. And the cool thing about that play is they would do it and it would be different every single night. They would just allow it to be whatever. And what it taught Julianne Moore, she said, is to create the circumstances for those like things to happen, so that she
Mm,
would, you know, instead of trying to allow the, you know, allow the space to have those things. I think that the biggest
yeah,
lesson an actor or any performer is just allowing things to happen, you know. It just you know,
totally.
it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's that space. I think if we're all working in the same thing. But you brought up such a good point. What was her name, the girl who played Maxine, she talked about something like that. She
Oh
said,
yeah, Mia Goth.
Mia Goth, she talked about, she said sometimes though that the set being crazy can actually help her. She felt like
That
it can
makes
be,
sense. If you're doing a horror film, I could
you know,
see where
yeah.
some of those sets are helpful.
Like was it Oliver Stone talked about how, you know, he wasn't impressed. He I don't know, he was playing mind games with Michael Douglas when he was doing Wall Street. Uh, he said he comes up to him in the train. He says, "Hi, wait, you doing okay? Everything's good." It's like, "Yeah, yeah, it's good." He's like, "Well, why are you acting like this is the first time you ever acted?" And he just was on him, and it propelled
Mhm.
him to be up to there. It's funny if you watch like the behind the scenes there. After he does a scene, he looks over at like Charlie Sheen's character, who like is supposed to be in awe of Gordon Gekko, and he says, "Was that good?"
Mm,
So it's such a change of that. But sometimes you get
mhm.
directors like that, like you've got what was it, Stanley Kubrick. We had Vincent D'Onofrio talk to us at Strasbourg. He told us, this one actor kept messing up his lines. Stanley didn't go up and tell him that he's messing up the line. He just kept saying the number of the take. So it'll be like, "This is take 30, take 40." I mean,
Oh
which
my
is horrible
god.
for an actor, but like he was like the king of like manipulators. You get some of those directors who are so used to like working with like what is it? I interviewed William Griffey, who worked with William Shatner, and he was doing this kid's in the scene with him, and he starts like leaning over. And the reason he's leaning over is because they won't be able to cut to him because of the way he's positioned himself. And William Griffey goes,
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, so you got like some of these actors who will do like crap like that, where like they'll, where they're like trying to get more in the scene, which I
Yeah.
just am kind of like, I mean, can it just be good? I mean, I guess that's kind of how you had to do it back in those days. I mean, it's William Shatner's back in that day where like the transition to kind of where we are with modern day films. He
Sure.
was kind of around during probably the last of the 60s type. Well, no, even before
Sure.
50s stuff, the last of the film noir, like Orson Welles things. But it's just like, you're dealing with like an actor who's like doing something like that, like, you know,
Gosh.
just so
It's
they
just
can't cut to the kid.
yeah.
And
Oh
it's great
gosh.
that the director caught him and just went to him. He said, "Give the kid a break." I asked him that in the
For
interview. It's
sure.
just like, and he acknowledged it. He said, "Yeah." So he knew what he was
Yeah.
doing or whatever, which is just like,
Yeah.
oh
And
God, I
I
mean,
do have empathy for that time period being a completely different time to make movies. Again,
yeah,
that's why it's important
yeah,
to have underserved groups in film,
yeah,
because uh, I think that's it's just such a patriarchal, individualistic way to look at things. Of
yeah,
I'm gonna do this so
there you go.
that you can't cut to him, and I think um, I think it's interesting because we used the word manipulation earlier and being like a manipulative director. And at the end of the day,
Yeah,
all directing is manipulative. Every type of
in a way.
director is manipulating, and
But then there's
actually,
manipulating where like, like you've probably heard about the Shelley Long, not Shelley Long, Shelley Duvall, Shelley Long, yeah, Shelley Long and Stanley Kubrick. That would work
yeah,
out
the
really well.
famous,
She would
yeah,
be she'd be like walking out, like, I'm not letting him talk to me like that. But Shelley Duvall really wanted to please him, but she was like going through. There's that famous behind the scenes thing where they've got the snow machine and everything, and she comes out. She said, "Did you say action?" Stanley's about ready to lose. He's like, "Come on, man, we're freezing our butts off," because they're like out there in like
yeah,
ice cold thing. But then you got
yeah.
some of the stuff that he was doing. Was he playing her? I don't know. It's
Well, and I think the difference for me with like manipulation and the type of manipulation I strive to do is there's
yeah,
manipulation where you have respect for the people that are around you and that are on the crew,
yeah,
and you are trying to get the best performance, that they can
yeah,
give you. And then there's manipulation where you think you're smarter than everyone and you
yeah,
think you're better than the person in front of you. And it's just like if you
yeah,
think you're smarter than everyone on your crew,
yeah.
like you did a job assembling your crew. Like you should be the dumbest person there as the director, in my opinion. Like I hope you're surrounded by people that are more
Yeah,
talented than you. That uh,
yeah,
you know, I even think like showing up and having like really great crafty for really great cinematographers, like that's manipulating the situation, but that's
Yeah.
manipulating it in a way where the cinematographers are going to
Yeah.
get the nutrients they need to do the work that they want to
Yeah.
do, and everyone walks away with
It's
portfolio work that they want to have, you know?
it's not manipulation like, that poor kid, like, if he was so excited to be on, he tells the story better than I
Oh,
did,
that
but
is
he was
a
like, he was
really
so
sad.
excited, and it's William Shatner using the old tricks so that this kid
Oh,
isn't even gonna be in the
this
movie.
kid. And that
The
kid was
poor
like, that was like his earliest memory and learning
Yeah,
lesson in Hollywood,
yeah.
Oh
Well, I
God.
think Will Griffith did a good job of, like, I don't think he was aware that he was doing this.
Sure.
He just, like, kind of
Yeah.
pulled him aside. He's like, "Look, come on.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing here, but you're like the lead in this movie. You're gonna have plenty of
Yeah.
screen time. You don't need to go through that." But I think also sometimes they're doing that because they're seeing that they're bad, and they're probably
Hmm.
like, "Well, this probably isn't gonna be used at all anyway," so they might
Right.
there may be something like that, but I don't know. I mean, I would love to interview William Shatner and be like, "Explain some of these tricks. Like, where does this come from? Was this something you were taught? Did you learn this?" Yeah, that would
Totally.
be an interesting thing to ask. Although he
Yeah.
famously said on, what is it, Red Letter Media, "I don't do podcasts," or whatever.
Oh.
They're
Oh,
like
you're
some of my
telling me
favorite.
the guy that was being mean to the kid on set won't do podcasts?
No, 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 Red Letter Media, YouTube channel, they
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to have William Shatner on or something
Oh,
like
I
that, and he
see.
kept saying that I don't do podcasts, even though it's a YouTube channel, and they,
Oh,
like, made this whole bit about it, and just like, well, it's great that he didn't wanna do our podcast because they start the
right.
show off, "Welcome to the Red Letter Media podcast," like,
Podcast, yeah.
they're just ripping them apart because, like, it's not a podcast. They could tell that, like, he has no idea what he's talking about, but he's just
Yeah.
assuming that it's like, "I don't do podcasts." Like, well, it's not even a podcast, it's a YouTube thing. Like, they're very like, the way they will take shots at people, the Red Letter Media people, is just amazing because it's like, it's so baked in there, and then you've gotta,
Yeah.
look at it, like, when they took, like, the poor Chris Stuckman kid or whatever, they, like, ripped him apart, but subtly ripped him apart in a way that, like, was plausible deniability, but
It's
I
so good.
digress. Um, okay, moving on. I wanted to ask you about your writing process. Talk a little bit about your writing process.
Ooh, is there a writing process? Um,
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, so, I did creative writing in college, and, uh those professors very much like drove home this idea of like you have to get up every morning at 5 a.m. before work, and you have to do it every single day, and
Yeah,
and their philosophy was so based in like forcing yourself to write whenever you don't want to
yeah,
write, and so many of those professors were like, if you really want to write, you have to be someone who will get up at 5 a.m.
yeah.
And I have never been someone like that. Um, and I actually quit writing for like 2 or 3 years after college because they had burnt me out so bad with their little
Congratulations,
professorial
professors.
techniques. Yeah, like,
Wow,
and
great
and
job. You
I
talked
see
them
that
out. It's
happen.
like
Yeah. I mean, I've also seen that happen with like student filmmakers and stuff like that. Like a lot of times academics will really burn you out with like the
Yeah,
deadlines and the workload they're asking you to do, and they're really asking you, in many cases professors are often asking you to like ignore your intuition and your inspiration.
yeah,
Um so how I found my way back to writing was, I have always kind of dabbled in the artist way, as we all have,
yeah.
and the morning pages and doing those morning pages, and was so interesting about the morning pages is what was so interesting is that type of journaling was so frowned upon by my earlier professors, where journaling wasn't real writing.
Yeah.
And then I did the morning pages consistently for a while, and it like broke something loose in my brain where like writing became so much less scary. I was really, if I was waking, it was the first time I was waking up in the morning and writing first thing. And so the first thing I was doing was like acknowledging the censor in my brain and letting it go. Like, I don't have to censor my own pages that I'm journaling. It doesn't have to be spelled right. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. I can contradict myself. I can
Yeah.
loop back to things later. And exercising that muscle of just like not judging myself was something that I was only able to do through journaling for 3 pages a day. And then once I kind of broke through that after journaling for a couple months, then the inspiration to write fiction just naturally kind of returned to me. I started to have these little inspired thoughts of like, oh, that would be really fun to write that, or that would be really fun to write that. And um, I think also too, it was really intimidating to learn how to write a script, and the best
Mhm.
advice I got was to just read a bunch of scripts. And so I would go on Script Slug and just read every script of every I read like the whole Mean Girls script, any movie that really resonated with me. I just read a bunch of scripts and was able to kind of like um process and amalgamate just what's important to include in a script, how you format different things. And I think it made me realize like it's really not as hard as I'm making it out to be.
Yeah.
Um, and
I think
so
that's the scary thing about, right, is it's like if you've got a final draft or a Excel text or whatever, a lot of that is gonna, it's not as hard as and they make it look hard because they
totally
got all these, you know, making every, action word, bold, and stuff,
right.
so that it reads well. Did you read Little Miss Sunshine? That's a great script to read.
No, but I love that
Yeah,
movie. I should
it's a really
definitely
good
go read
script.
that script. And I
It's a
think
good
too,
script.
I also at the time like I didn't have money for final draft, and I felt like a lot of the
Yeah,
film
same here.
film bros were like making me feel like you have to be writing a final draft. And
No, you don't have
ultimately
to.
like I ended up doing like the free version of Celtics for a while, and then
Right.
I like eventually did like their $30 a month subscription. I have final draft now,
Well,
but um
they have a they have a subscription service now too, and they
I know they
all of
do.
them have done it, man, really. Like, they were like the good
Yeah,
ones. They were
they
like
were the good
they're
guys.
free."
Yeah,
Nope, you
I
gotta
think they still have a free version. I think it's
yeah,
like whatever the you could only have a
10
certain number of
pages.
projects or something. Yeah, there was some loophole where they finally got me.
Yeah,
Celtics finally got me. And I will say I over the last year I bought Final Draft and I kind
same
of
here.
hate Final Draft. I feel like they screw me
Really?
all the time. The collaboration feature ain't on Final Draft. It's like you both have to have the exact same version to be able to collaborate with each other. Whereas like on
Really?
Celtics is much more like Google Docs where like
Which
you can
version do you
like
have?
collaborate.
Which version do you
Final
have?
Draft.
Yeah,
I mean
I got
whatever
12. I've got
the
12.
what
I
do I
still haven't gotten
have?
13 because I have to go and buy that again. Now
It
they make
must
you
be like
buy
30.
it again.
And they make you buy it every time. Literally, like we are writers. We don't have the money for this.
Exactly, what yeah.
And
But
so
it is
at the
good. I mean, it
yeah,
for all it's bad, it's like,
but I do think so much in filmmaking, you can really stop yourself early with the
yeah,
money that they try to charge you for things. And I
yeah,
think ultimately, like being a filmmaker is being resourceful. And the best thing I did for myself was just told myself, like, you don't have to have a final draft version of the
yeah,
script. You can go find a free script
yeah.
writing software for now and just write with the free software for now. And one day we'll get
It's like
final draft.
what is it? The famous story. Well, it's not really a famous story, but it's kind of a cliche. The guy that goes to Starbucks. He's got his nice computer out. He's doing everything. He's got the final draft and everything, but he hasn't written anything.
Exactly. That is like such an easy trap for me to fall into. And now I do it with editing now too, where I like it's almost like I spend more time like looking for like plugins or like
Yeah,
templates when I could have just like edited the motion graphics myself. And
yeah,
um I think yeah, for me like the lesson I learned over and over is like sometimes it's just so much more fulfilling to be resourceful than to like
Yeah.
pay the money for whatever the easiest way to do it is. And
I
so
think it's to get it done, to actually do it. I mean, that's the
yeah,
scary thing is you're sitting there at the blank page, as they say. If you can
yeah,
confront the blank page, you're halfway through because most people are never gonna start.
totally. And
They're just gonna stop.
yeah, and I'm a huge some of my friends disagree with me on this, but I'm a huge proponent of the vomit draft and just like
Yeah.
just write actively try to write the version of this script right now. Like try to write the worst version and you have something down and you have like a skeleton to go off of. And it's like
You
the
know who
less
said something
yeah.
similar to that was Willem Dafoe said, "Try and be a bad actor."
Yeah.
And
I
it's
bet
true.
that
It's
works
a
for
freedom to
so
that.
many things, like so many artistic skills, because ultimately you just have to relax and not judge yourself to be good at all of these
But if I
artistic
did it, I probably
endeavors.
would be like, "Wow, you're a bad actor." I'd be like, "Wait,
Yeah, I feel
no,
like there's a
that
limit.
wasn't what I wanted."
Yeah.
William,
No,
Willem,
totally.
get over here.
I do feel like Willem can get away with that in in a way that
Yeah, it's
not
he's get
everyone
like
can.
like if you actually like there's a danger to that if you said, try and be a bad actor. I mean, there's many ways you could go and be like, I don't know my lines.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
There's a bad actor. Be like, you
Yeah.
just start making up gibberish and be
No,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
totally.
like I think you need to go a little bit more in detail of what you mean by being a bad actor. There's somebody that could just take it and be like, I'm just, be like, well, Willem Dafoe said just be a bad actor. So, I'm not gonna stand on my mark. Well, you're
No,
not in the shot
totally.
anymore.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But the beautiful thing about writing is no one ever has
Yeah,
to see that first
exactly.
draft, like different from acting, like and that's the mental hurdle you have to get yourself over
Yeah,
is like if you write something down and you never want to put it out into the world, you don't have to.
yeah.
Like
Just do it. Just write
yeah.
it. That's the hardest part is especially in this day and
Yeah.
age. You gotta sit
And
down
I
there and
think
just do it.
I grew up on like, I read The War of Art and that Stephen Pressfield philosophy that's it
Good
feels
book.
very like it's good. It feels very masculine patriarchal to me where,
Yeah,
it's like just do it, just have the discipline, just be
yeah,
strong and resilient. And I think what's worked for me better with writing is being
yeah,
really in touch with myself and my intuition as far as I'm very aware of like my worst traits when it comes to writing and my worst procrastination tendencies, but I don't like hate those parts of myself. I just more try to think about it like, how can I work around this? How can I be creative? How can I work through this? And like for me, I hate to say it, but sometimes putting on like the fireplace YouTube video and lighting a candle and setting a little ambiance, sometimes like showing that little bit of
yeah.
self-care will get me to sit down and lock it and write. But when I like am just trying to grip it and like white knuckle it and like you don't have to
Yeah.
enjoy this process, that never really like worked for me and got me to write in a sustainable way. So I do think it's
Same
okay to
here.
take care of yourself, you know?
Same here. I like to have an idea, kind of an idea of where I'm going, and then I sit and it usually just kind of comes out because it's just because
Mhm.
I've set the circumstances for it to just be there. So I'm kind of in the head of that, and it's just trying to convey what I'm seeing in my head. Is
Mhm.
yeah, I find the hardest thing in trying to do that into words. But I agree.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's more important for you to be comfortable, and I think you're right that idea of like no, you gotta be it's like what is it the David Goggins thing? It's be like you got to run 6 miles a day. It doesn't matter if your foot is broken. Just keep doing it
Yeah.
because your mind can go further than the body, and it's like yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's a middle ground here, I mean, I'm all for
Totally.
working hard, but, then
There's some
tell
value to that, but
he's telling the story, it's like, "Yeah, I didn't go to the doctor, and now they found out that I really should have gone," and it's like, "Yeah, because your body was telling you that you were in pain, like, there's a limit to that, yeah, you could just keep going and keep dragging the body through, but eventually, the body's not going to be able to do anything anymore because you've just, it's kind of like a battery. You got to
Right.
charge it
Totally.
sometimes,
And
And
finding
I,
a sustainable practice for sure. Like
yeah,
it has to be sustainable. And I also think like what was so fascinating to realize about all of my professors making me feel bad about journaling is now
yeah.
I mean I write every day because I do journal every day, but I don't write
Oh,
like
that's
fiction
cool.
or scripts every day. And the thing is like I don't really have to write consistently because I am journaling every day. So when I do sit
Mm,
down to write a script, I'm pretty well practiced in like taking what I'm seeing or hearing in my head and putting it on paper. And I'm
yeah.
very in touch with like I can hear the thoughts I'm having. And that comes from journaling. And so I really don't have to get up at 6 a.m. and write my
No.
screenplay every
That, that,
single
it,
day.
it's this
It,
stupid thing of like saying that you got to eat 6 meals in a day. It's like, it's the food. It's the quantity of the food. It has nothing to do with 6 meals. It's not it's not magic because it's 3 meals. You might be more full here, and
hmm
there's little things like that, but it's the same thing what you're saying, like, you got to get up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. Was it The Rock would always do that? He'd be like, I'm getting up 5 a.m. to work out and doing this. Like, okay, great, but I'm gonna work out at 10, and I'm still gonna be able to
Yeah,
do what I need to do, because that works
right.
for me,
And
you know
I'm so happy for The Rock that he can do that. But the thing is, if I tried to do that, I would just never work out ever. But if
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like,
not gonna
oh,
work
I
for
can work out at 10 a.m., then
yeah,
then I'll work out a few days a week,
yeah,
and that's enough for
yeah.
me, you know?
It's like when people say, well, if you're just reading nonfiction, then you're not reading. Or if you're reading fiction, you're not reading. It's like these made up rules that don't mean anything.
Mhm.
All they do is divide, like your teacher saying, oh, you got to get up at 5 a.m. Or you're not. It's like the whiplash thing. He's like, well,
Mhm.
if he couldn't handle my pain, then I guess he wasn't good enough. And it's just like,
Mhm.
that's really, you could have potentially ruined that guy, and he could have got, like, I always wanted to see like what happens, like they had this whole continue. You've seen Whiplash, at the ending
Yeah.
where they're doing everything, and like they're kind of like friends at the end there, and it's like, how did that conversation end afterwards? It's like he
Sure.
almost humiliated him in front of the whole world, but he rose above it. So is it like, well, bygones speak bygones. I mean, he's just gonna be like, hey, we had this moment, we're gonna go off, but I still hate you.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
um,
No,
Sorry, I
for
got stuck on that.
sure.
The
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to ask you about is, yeah, you've done other arts. It's like you do pottery and you do painting. Talk a little bit about that, and then we will go to my esteemed inside the actors studio questions that I've come up
Oh,
with.
hell yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I found like the older I've gotten, like I just find that all when you're an artistic, creative person, all art kind of feeds into each other. So there were times where like I was really at the beginning of let's see, at the beginning of 2024 in January, I had gone through a lot in December, and
Mm,
I was really feeling a lot of imposter syndrome around film and feeling like I
mm,
like couldn't make a film on my own, and I was feeling really burnt out in film. So I enrolled in a pottery class at our cultural arts center, and just like I needed to be creative, but I needed to do something that was as far from film as I could possibly get. And then it was so therapeutic. Like I recommend pottery to anyone because you're just playing in mud and it's so
yeah.
tactile and it's very meditative. But it was like it really like healed me in a way that by the end of this 8-week course, I was sitting there like making a vase, and an idea for a short film just like came to me because I wasn't thinking about it. And I got this like spark of inspiration. And for the first time, I felt excited about film after feeling really burnt out about it. So I always think it's been really good for me to pursue as many different like art disciplines as I can because they kind of just all feed into each other and inspire each other. And I think Painting, I mean, painting is like so meditative. I could sit there and go into a flow state for like 4 hours painting,
Yeah.
and it's really, really, I think because it's tactile, but you're also really zeroing in on these tiny shapes in front of you. And there's something about it that just really puts me into a flow state. And I realized, like, I started taking some painting classes in January, February. And then when I was shooting my short, my first like solo directing project in June, I had such a better understanding of lighting and how lighting works because I had spent so much time with paintings thinking about, okay, which pieces are the dark tones, which pieces are the mid tones, what are the light tones. And I had so much better of an understanding of the way that like light falls across people's faces and the way light comes through windows and diffuses through fabrics and things like that, because I had gone back to almost this much more like ancient version uh of lighting and thinking about lighting. And of course I'm
Wow.
thinking about the famous book is Painting with Light, for cinematographers.
Oh yeah.
um and so I think, um it's, but also I don't want like pottery and painting to sound like they're things that I just do to make me better at film. I think they also are so good for like my mental health and
Yeah.
for me to just be like grounded in the present moment, for me to think about like what's beautiful and satisfying to me. And also I think it's so important to have art that you're not pursuing as a career, because it can be
Yeah.
really, it could just really take a toll on your like artistic spirit when you're only thinking about art in the terms of how can it be a business for you. And so
Yeah.
I think I was also really pulled to pottery in particular because I knew it was something that I never wanted to like turn into a business. And so it can literally just be fun. It doesn't have to be good. And there's something that's just so liberating about having at least one artistic discipline that's just for your pleasure. You don't have to be good at it. It doesn't have to be productive in any other way than it gives you like rest and a feeling of like feeling grounded in your body in the present moment.
Interesting.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
great. I love that. I'm already getting in a meditative state just listening to you talk about it. That's
I
awesome.
love doing different art things, but yeah, painting and
Great.
pottery are so nice because they're so tactile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. You kind of inspired me. I'm gonna have to stay. All right. So now we come to my inside the actor's studios. Do you have a
Okay.
beginning of the day? Oh, sorry. Do you have a beginning of the day routine?
Yes, I actually I have a, and I don't stick to this, but I have a notes app. I'll show you. Which I guess this is
Mm.
an audio medium, but I have a this notes app that basically I went through every single day and I wrote down the planetary ruler of the day.
Oh
So like
wow.
Monday is the moon, and I have night routines in here too, but I'll be honest, I like don't usually do the night
What
routines.
what is what is the what is that app?
So this is just like in my notes app. I just
Oh,
like
this
wrote
is
this
just
down.
the notes
Yeah. Yeah.
from
Yeah, just
Apple? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
yep,
All
yep,
right. I know what you're talking.
yep.
That's what I thought it was. Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
and so like Monday is ruled by the moon, so the characteristics are intuition, emotion, divination, and the divine feminine. So that day, I like give myself a little break on working out, and my thing I do, I meditate, I eat breakfast, I journal, and then I do a little yoga or stretching. But then Tuesday is ruled by Mars, which is about action, initiation, creative
Yeah.
fire, and aggression. So that one I go at it a little more. I get up, I meditate, then I work out right away. I take a cold shower, and then I eat breakfast.
Wow, you
Um,
take the cold shower. You do that. That's cool.
I do. You know what I recommend? I not to sound like Andrew Huberman or whatever that guy is, but what got me into it is my therapist recommended, okay, at the end of like take a nice warm shower. Then
Yeah,
at
that's
the
what I
end of
do a
the
little bit.
then at the end of the warm
Okay.
shower, do just like a 30-second cold plunge. And I turn it back warm at the end of the cold plunge.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah, same
literally
here.
do
Okay,
30 seconds.
so you're not actually doing a full cold shower. Okay, that's cool. That's what I
No.
do.
Yeah.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
And I think that's all you gotta do to get that little dopamine hit. So,
Yeah,
I do that, and then, yeah, basically, I have, like, every day kind of written out where depending on its, like, planetary ruler, I
that's cool.
have, a little, like, routine that goes along with that, and I just started doing that over the past few months. I used to just have, like, the same morning routine every morning, but I found, like, I'm someone who really hates routine and I hate
Mhm.
feeling like I'm trapped to a routine. So I
Yeah,
I wanted to find a way to add a little variety, but I know if like I don't have it written down, I'm like not going to do it.
yeah.
So I was trying to find a way to like work with the energy of each day and for me like astrological energy like I'm no astronomer, so I couldn't tell you whether or not the planets actually affect our movements or anything, but for
Yeah,
me personally, what I found is working with the energy of the day and the planetary ruler of the day, like, actually kind of always hits. Like, I
that's
never wanna
cool.
work out on a Monday, but if all I have
Wow.
to do is, like, stretch a little bit, then that's, like, better than where we started out, you know?
What sign are you?
I'm a Libra,
I'm an
Libra
Aries.
sun. Yeah, yeah. I'm an Aries rising, so I usually
Oh,
connect with
that's
some
cool.
Aries people. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, you already kind of answered this, but do you have a nighttime routine?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like
Changes.
I'm so much worse at keeping a nighttime routine than a morning routine.
Yeah,
And for me, the morning routine is the most important because I usually tend to wake up in a state of like panic and anxiety like first thing in the morning. It's
really?
something that's like plagued me my whole life and I even I struggled for a long time. I struggled with a weed addiction for a long time because
Oh,
I would wake up first thing in the morning and the only thing that would like bring me down to a baseline level of not anxiety was smoking weed first thing in the morning. And
yeah.
spoiler alert, that does not usually lead to great places.
No. No.
Waking and baking every day of the week. Everyone's on their own journey, but I would warn people against that. And so I had to do like a lot of trial and error and work to figure out how am I going to like bring down my anxiety in the morning and prepare myself for the day
That's
in a
cool.
way that I can be functional. So the morning routine is like really super important to me, and the night routine, it's like it is really nice when I set myself up for success and I'm like reading before 10 and I fall asleep by 10. It really sets me up for a better day. But I maybe do like a night routine like once a week and I try to do like usually I'll do like a warm shower and I have like color changing lights in my bathroom so I'll make it like that
Oh, that's
Blade Runner
cool.
pink.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I've got the color. I changed all my light bulbs too to like the
yeah.
color. That's
Oh,
awesome. I love
I
that.
love taking, like, a shower in, like, the pink lighting, and then I'll, play, like, healing frequency type music or, like, very calming, like, flute music and stuff.
Same here.
Yeah.
But when I go on
So funny.
Instagram, I get recommended like 50 to 100 different meditation lists
Yes,
of things.
that's
I was
I
listening
was so
to
scared. Yeah. I was scared with Spotify Wrapped coming out. I was like, "Oh, no, it's just gonna say, like, throat
deep
chakra
music.
frequencies." Like
Yeah. Like I was listening to last night, deep sleep music playlist, Cosmic Bloom.
Mhm.
So I know
Mhm. That's
exactly
my
what you're talking
jam.
about,
That's my
you know?
jam. Yeah,
It's like, yeah, yeah,
totally.
you see all these, yeah, all these people are putting their rap lists of you. Yours will be throat.
Yeah,
My
totally,
favorite
totally.
band, man, Throat Chakra. It's like, who's
Yeah,
that? Oh, it's just
yeah.
dance music.
Yeah, no, shout out to Miracle Tones, my top artist of the
Yeah,
year.
yeah, I like
Yeah.
solfeggios.
Yes, exactly.
589
Yeah.
hertz.
Yeah, healing subliminals. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
But then
cool.
I don't want to paint it like, I mean, there's certainly nights of the week where I'm literally just like scrolling on TikTok or like
We all
watching
do that.
TV and fall asleep to that.
We all do.
Yeah,
It's so hard to just like that's where the real discipline. That's what they should be really. That like your professor being like yelling about 5 a.m. It's like help me with creating the discipline for that. So just telling me I'm a
literally.
bad person because I don't read at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Like who cares?
Right.
How about just
Totally.
reading?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, we already answered this again, but we'll get a little bit more deeper into it. Do you meditate?
Yes, I and also, like, if I was listening to this podcast when I was, like, 22, I would be, like, so annoyed at myself when I say this, but, like, meditating every day is literally the best thing you could do for yourself.
It's
It's
true.
complete I mean, that like I said, I still struggle with addiction to weed, and
Mm,
the number one thing that has helped me through that is meditation. Like, every time I get anxious and I wanna reach for a joint or I wanna smoke a bowl, the only thing that has been able to combat that anxiety in a similar
yeah.
way has been meditation. And so I try to do it every single day. I usually fall off if I'm
Yeah.
like on vacation or something. But my favorite
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do?
app for meditation, it's called Chani,
Mm,
Chani, and it's an astrology app.
mm,
And it's like $10 a month. And I
yeah.
had tried other meditation apps, but this one, she has guided meditations, and it's run by this famous astrologer, Chani Nicholas, and her guided meditations are some of the best I've ever done. Like, I had a Headspace subscription, and
Yeah. It's very general headspace. I felt with.
I've tried lots of like guided meditations, but the Chani guided meditations are
Cool.
so like that, even if you're like not an astrology person, it's worth the price of the app alone because
Mm,
they're very visual and very like it's a lot of visualization around your body, which is
oh,
so
that's cool.
powerful and like shifting the state that you're
What is
in.
it called again?
Chani, Chani. So, and she'll have like each meditation has an intention. So it might be like inner voice, it might be
Yeah.
connection, it might be clearing or something like that. And she just guides you through these like very visual meditations that I find to be like so
Yeah.
inspiring and anxiety reducing and really lovely. She's a very talented like meditation guide.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I meditate too. For me, I used to have a lot of anxiety when like things would end. Like if I would
Mm,
go to a party or something, I would get really depressed, and I did not know to self worth. So, meditation helped me with that. The
mhm.
meditation I do is transcendental meditation, which
Mhm.
kind of expensive, but it's worth it. Because I've got the app, forever, and you've got your mantra or whatever. But I've done several different meditations. I did Joe Dispenza. Have you ever read his book? Becoming
Mm-mm.
Supernatural. He has a meditation. I mean, his was like 45 minutes every day, and that was just 45 minutes and try and not just have my head just wander for everything,
Totally.
which is what I kind of liked about the transcendental. I wasn't planning on doing it. I went to New York and I tried to do it. I didn't have the money for it, and I couldn't do it. But when I came back, one night I just was like, let me just see what that is again. And then I
Mhm.
saw it, and it came up, and it was like almost like a voice telling me, like you're so cliche,
It's time.
where it's like
No, you're in
the
good
the
company.
voice
I
the
get it.
voice came and it
Yeah.
grabbed me into the night, and I was like,
Yeah.
no, but it just felt like it worked out, and I really like the guy that instructed me. It's 20 minutes in the
Mm.
morning, 20 minutes at night. I mean, I kind of fall
Mm-hmm.
off at certain points, but what I like about it is I always have that place to go to when I'm feeling. For me, the most important thing about meditation is having that place to go to when I didn't feel, was just going,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I liked about meditation. To me, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what practice you do, as long as you're doing something, because I feel like so many people would be so much better off if they would just meditate just a little bit. I struggle with it. It's just like, just do 5 minutes. Just do
I know
5 minutes.
it's so cliche to say, but literally like all I do is 10
Yeah.
minutes in the morning,
Yeah.
and it has totally shifted the way that my brain
Yeah.
works. It's also like you said, there's just something about like being present with your body and your mind in
Yeah.
any state that you're in. If you can just like sit in it for a second and just be present with it, like most emotions get processed and go away within like 90 seconds of being like
Yeah.
grounded and present with those emotions. So it's really
And
powerful.
don't worry if your mind wanders a little bit. I think some people,
Mhm.
there's a tendency that I know for me, I was like, well, I guess it just didn't count because I just sat there and wandered, my mind wandered.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't work like that. It's like, they
Right.
want you to do 20 minutes, but it's more the quality of what you're doing is kind of what I try to look at it. It's like the quality of
Right.
it. It's just
And
like anything.
also being
Yeah.
curious about like the fact that you want to criticize yourself for your mind wandering. Maybe
Yeah,
that's like why you're here meditating, and what you need to work through is like you can
exactly.
actually just be like so compassionate with yourself, but it's a muscle that you have to practice being
Yeah.
compassionate with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I like about the transit, it's like, it's just like, try, just let the mantra come like a, don't try
Mhm.
and say it hard. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, just let it come out. And it's just, to
Mhm.
me, it's once again, it's about relaxation. It's about just allowing things to happen. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter to me the practice. It matters that, some form of consistency and just allowing things to just happen, because if you can do that, then something happens, somebody cuts you off on the road or whatever. You're like, you might get mad at that minute, and then you go, you can go
Hmm,
back.
that's interesting. I got so mad at that person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
totally.
I could go, I can go back to, I mean, I'm still kind of pissed,
Yeah,
it's not the end of the day. I don't have to sit there and dwell on it. And
for
sometimes you also
sure.
think it's like, I always try to think of it like this. It's like, if I had like a pregnant wife in there and I cut somebody off, when I got there, it's like, well, it was because I needed to do that. But when somebody
Mhm.
cuts us off, it's like they they deliberately did that to hurt me. Like, we have no
Mhm.
idea why they cut us off. They could have cut it on.
Yeah,
They had a bad day today, you know. They could found out they had cancer, but we never think like that. Where I was like, he directly did it to me.
totally.
How dare that's it's just like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What do you do for physical fitness? You kind of answered this already. You've answered all of it.
Yeah, with the morning routine. Uh, well, my favorite way to work out is to do a
Hmm,
dance workout in the mornings. I
cool.
totally recommend. There's this dance studio called Forward Space in New York, and they have a virtual platform. And so it's called like the Forward Space Hub, and they have these 24-minute dance workouts that they also have like they have 50-minute and
Yeah,
longer ones, but for me, usually
yeah,
24 minutes of cardio in the morning is like what I need to get me to like a baseline of feeling good.
yeah,
And a lot of it's like a mental battle of, I like don't want to work out, but like 20 minutes sounds so easy and so
yeah,
approachable. And so it doesn't really like overwhelm me. So I, and like a dance workout too, like they you're so like present with your body when you're dancing, and you're feeling all these like tiny parts of like your fingers and your toes, and how
yeah,
things that you don't normally think about so closely. So I find that that is also like its own form of meditation.
yeah,
And it can just like I love forward space because I've struggled with finding dance instructors that are both kind of like spiritual and play
Yeah.
really good bumpin' music. And I
Yeah.
find that they like are at the perfect intersection of like playing my favorite Usher songs, but also like, okay, we're washing this feeling over your body. And
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I love a dance workout. I used to do like spin and a lot more. I was like a big athlete in high school and stuff, but I think the older I get, the more I am just trying to be a little bit more in touch with my like intuition and my feminine side. And I find that
Yeah.
dance is a really good way to do that. And it's really fun. And the more that I can trick myself into thinking I'm having fun
Yeah.
and not working out, the more I'll work out.
Yeah. What was your sport?
I played volleyball in high school.
Cool. Cool.
Hmm.
Cool. 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 For me, I'm very much I just like lifting weights. I'm
Yeah.
crazy like that. Um,
Yeah.
for me,
If I could, I would. But I
yeah,
used to do like
yeah.
they would have the volleyball players go work out with the football players and do like
Oh
bench
God.
pressing and squatting and and you know what? I think it was tough because I ended up kind of like throwing off my posture in a way that it like took
Yeah.
me years, especially the bench pressing. Like it took me years to get back to like a better posture from that, you know?
Yeah, you see, that's the thing, is you gotta like find the exercises that work for you. I mean, for me,
Mhm.
I try to be as focused as possible. So I'm trying to like get as much as I can out of my body. Like I'm almost like
Mhm.
my own like trainer. I'm like, come on, Justin, you can do more. No, 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 don't
Mhm.
do that. You got more in you. Go in there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll say this out loud. People probably think I'm crazy, but I'm
No, I
like,
get that. I
I
get that for sure.
but I gotta, get it, especially with doing something like deadlifts, where it's just like every sequence has to be like placed, properly, because it's just like if you don't get off at the bottom a certain way, it's gonna be harder to get there. It's just like
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it's just like a mental test, and I'm in such a routine that I just, but that's
Mhm.
that's me. I like yoga and stuff, but it's just like after by workouts, sometimes like I'll just be on the floor, like can't do anything. Like I've kind of like made it so it's like, okay, I can do Duolingo here because I can't really move or do anything. So
Yeah.
what can I do while I'm in this place of like I don't want to move, I don't really want to do anything right now. Just like completely exhausted, because it's just like just all as I like to work out to failure a lot. So it's
Uh-huh.
like after I'm just like, ugh, I can't. So I don't do I like really only do like 3 days because
Uh-huh.
it takes so much time to
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 recover,
uh to
yeah.
to recover from that.
Yeah.
I used to just smash through and be like, oh, it doesn't care. Who cares if you're recovered? Just get in there. And it's like, no, just you're gonna have more of what you want if you just give yourself a break.
Yeah.
You
For
know?
sure.
So
For sure. Yeah.
but that's so cool, volleyball. What are you reading?
I'm reading Sally Rooney's new book, Intermezzo. Um, are you a Sally Rooney fan at all?
I've not. I don't know. I may have
She
heard of it. What
wrote
has
she
she
wrote
written? What has
Normal
she written?
Normal People and Beautiful World, Where Are You was her second book. Um, she's very much for the girlies, but
Interesting.
she's
Sally.
I don't know, she's like this I I love her stuff. I believe she's Irish, I'm assuming.
Mm,
And she is at my favorite intersection of culture, which is that she's very like well read and a
mhm,
very like literary writer. You can tell that she studied a lot of literature, but she's
yeah,
also got this like her finger is on the pulse of like contemporary culture. And there's
that's
this
cool.
um like she understands like Gen Z chronically online speak and things like that. There's
Oh
one, I mean,
wow.
this book it's super literary in the sense that like it's one of those
Yeah.
books where like nothing happens kind of, and you're just
Yeah.
following these characters as nothing happens. But
But
she
you're an
has
English major, so that's probably gonna be like, you notice,
up my alley. Yeah.
right? Oh yeah.
And she has this one character in Intermezzo called, her name's Naomi, and she's like this 22-year-old dating like an older lawyer that's paying for all of her shit. And the way that she writes Naomi speaking and how she speaks is like so realistic to how the girls around me that are 22 speak, and
Yeah.
not in a way that like makes fun of her. She still
Yeah.
feels very smart, and you can tell she's very smart and she's very cunning, but like she uses these like words from like TikTok and stuff that were only developed like through being online.
Yeah.
And so I love when a writer can like show respect to young people
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
way. So yeah, I'm reading that right now.
Not
And then
like your
one of my
professors. It's like, none of your professors are like, you got to get up at 5 a.m. It doesn't count if you.
Yeah, and
Uh,
they were all writing books that were like so boring to read and could not
yeah.
get through any of those
And then
books.
when you,
Yeah,
yeah, and then when you tell them that, they're like, well, you just didn't get it.
you didn't get it. Yeah, totally.
You're just not smart enough to read. It's like, it couldn't be just you just wrote a boring book.
Yeah.
Because you see that
No,
in
never.
school so many times, like the people that are teaching, they're teaching not for the right reason. They're teaching because, they didn't do well. So now they're like, now I will teach you, like, and what? To not do well like you?
Yeah. There's a really good quote in The Artist Way that's like, professors are really good at tearing things apart, but not at assembling things.
Yeah.
And I think that, no offense to all the professors, there's some really great ones, but there's also there
Yes,
are a
there
lot
are.
of there
Pretty
are a
good.
lot of professors that really do a lot of damage to their students because all they do is teach them how to pick apart their art. And
Yeah.
that's so
And that's not
damaging
good.
to a young artist. Yeah.
It's not good. You don't want to be too critical. I mean, you got to be critical, but you also, it has to be placed into it. And it's so true. There,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think grading people does that, in
For
school. It's
sure.
almost like
For sure.
we're almost teaching ourselves to self-judge in a way
Yeah.
because we're like, well, I didn't get an A. I got a B. I'm
Right, and
stupid.
that's not good, and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it comes to that same like world. What are you listening to? You already kind of mentioned this, the throat chakra.
The throat chakra frequency. Have you listened to the new Kendrick Lamar album, GNX?
I haven't, but I've heard about it.
It's
I've heard it's good.
so good. I saw this TikTok that was like, it was
Let
so
me see.
funny. It was like, on the last album, Kendrick rapped about going to therapy, and then he came back on this album an even more hateful person. And but it's so good. I love Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, no, he's
And
he's a really good wordsmith.
he
When
is
you talk
so
about
good.
somebody that
Yeah, and he's funny. He's so funny. And I think he's at his funniest when he's roasting Drake. It's
there you
so
go.
funny when he roasts Drake.
And now he's trying to
um,
sue him. He's trying to
yeah,
sue. Drake is trying to sue. It's
yeah.
like, dude, just take the
He's
loss.
making it
The
worse,
the
man.
more you when you have an entire arena, chanting about you, Drake, and not in a good
Yeah.
way. I think it's time to, but I mean, it's a kind of people kind of always felt that about Drake. It's just like he was really successful, so nobody could do it. And it's like, Kendrick came along.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm gonna rip you apart.
No, it's just, I think Drake is just like so chuggy. Like, I used to love Drake, but he's so chuggy, and I feel like Kendrick is the perfect foil for him, where he's always just making fun of his little corny nature and his corny lyrics.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think this new album is so great because it feels like Kendrick is just like having fun on it. Like, it's not the most like polished album I've heard out of him,
yeah.
and it feel like you can feel that he had fun in the studio making it when you listen to it.
And that's good. I mean, well, I'm sure I mean, he's almost now made a second career of destroying Drake.
He is at his funniest, man.
He just rips him apart. What are you
Yeah.
watching?
I just finished, and listen, I like haven't watched TV. I normally just like watch movies, but I hadn't watched TV in like a year or something like that. And then my sister recommended The English Teacher on Hulu,
Mm.
and it kind of like got me back into like watching TV a little bit. It was really funny. I loved it. But then the next thing that came up on my suggestion was Tell Me Lies. Have you seen Tell Me Lies?
No, but I've heard of it. Tell me a
It
lot.
it's like if Gossip Girl like took place in college, like on a college
Yeah,
campus, which like it should have, like it's much more age appropriate that way.
yeah.
But um it,
What streaming service is it on? So that's on
it's on
Hulu?
Hulu.
Okay,
It's on
cool.
Hulu, and it's just these rich kids being evil to each other.
Oh
And
wow.
I don't know what it's
Oh,
so like
isn't this the successor to Pretty Little Liars or whatever? Doesn't it
I don't
have
think
anything?
so.
No? Okay.
Unless it might have been, it's an adaptation from a book, so it might have been written by the same. The book might have been written by the
That's what I
same
thought.
author.
Tell me lies. But anyways, yeah, keep going. Tell me.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the ultimate like TV brain candy. It's so
Ah,
fun.
interesting. Yeah, I have to look at that. I don't know. It's so hard for me to like watch a TV series. Like I'm watching Doom Prophecy right now, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I got to go back and watch the last episodes. I was like,
I'm the same way with TV. I have a tough time with TV. I really can't get into a lot of TV shows. I mean, the last thing I think I watched, well, the last thing I watched before this one was The Bear, and that was
I
like,
still haven't watched that. I hear that's so good. I gotta watch
yeah,
that.
so good. So good. And that one, it was originally supposed to be an A24 movie, and then they turned it into a TV show. And
Really?
it feels very like cinematic A24. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
that's the. Are you excited to see Nosferatu?
I'm so excited. I might even like I kind of want to go by myself to that one. I don't know why. I just want to be
Yeah.
like alone. I don't want to hear anyone else's thoughts about
Yeah.
it, but it sounds like the
See,
reviews are so good.
that's what I like sometimes just going to the movie theater. I was just like I sometimes want to just like absorb every single thing in that
Everything.
thing. And
Yeah,
like if you're not with somebody who's like a film person or whatever, they're putting their phone. I'm like, I won't even go to the bathroom. I like my eyes are just
same,
locked on. And
same,
it's like, and that's how I'm
totally.
gonna watch Nosferatu. I'm gonna be like,
Yeah, for
oh, this
sure.
is great.
I
You-
love watching a movie that way. Like I'm
Yeah,
locked in. I'm not
yeah.
snacking. I'm not going to the bathroom. Yeah,
It's like,
totally. Yeah.
it's like I just wanna, yeah, A24, they're such a they're a gift to God. Did you see what is it? The one what was the girl that she's like in London? Man, that could be a million movies. She's in London. That should narrow it down, right?
Yeah.
What movie could it be? It could be I'm gonna find it. Yeah, it's coming up. Well, I know you saw Beau Was Afraid. You saw
I
that
did.
movie.
I
That
did.
was a that was an interesting oh there it is. Men. Did you see Men?
Oh no, I didn't see Men.
You should
No.
watch that. I
Yeah.
thought that was a really the cinematography is beautiful in it. Um, I think it's a really strong female character where it's not
Yeah.
patronizing.
Yeah.
Um, I thought that's a movie I would watch. You should see Men.
Okay,
A24.
totally. Yeah. I've been
So many
meaning I
people have
should
not
watch it.
seen Men.
I've been meaning
I think you would like it.
I think when it came out some of the girlies were like, "Eh, it was okay" or something like that, but I would love to see it for myself because it does look like it was
No,
beautiful.
I thought it was that was one of my favorite movies. Because I love Love Lies Bleeding. I saw you love that too.
I
That
did.
episode. Because I lift weights, so like I was like, oh, cool, it's gym
Hell yeah.
culture and everything. And you got what's his name? Ed Harris playing that like sleazy father, and Kristen Stewart. She's just been
Oh
on a
my God.
roll. And then the
And
girl that
also
played the bodybuilder, yeah, she was great.
and like the plot twist towards the end of
Yeah.
it, I that was a moment where I was like screw all of my professors, because this is like the most satisfying ending. This is so good. This is so fun.
She's
And if I had written that in a script, they would have torn that
oh yeah.
apart. You know, they
Oh
would
yeah,
have been like, "See,
they
you
would have,
haven't
yeah.
set up the rules of the world in that way, yada yada." Like,
Yeah, that was such a special thing, and it's like, but it, but it works, where she,
it worked.
when she, becomes gigantic. Well, there you
Yeah,
go, that's not
it's
giving
so
anything
good.
away.
Yeah.
I thought that was such
No, you
a
could never anticipate what's gonna happen. Yeah.
it's just,
So good.
yeah, you see, but yeah, you're right. If you went to a screenwriters class, they would've been like, "Well, you can't do that." And it's like,
Yeah,
"Why
it's
not?
not, yeah, totally, totally.
Why
I
not? It works."
that movie was so gratifying to watch, because I was like, "This is so enjoyable," and this would have gotten torn apart in any sort of pure critical circle or whatever.
And it had such a cool, soundtrack. The soundtrack and the
Mhm.
background score. I think they
Mhm.
used the same guy that did Drive. I think was the one that
Oh.
did it, and it just had, like, such a I don't know, I just I wish more people would have seen that movie. They just it's
Mhm.
like one of those movies, like, if you guys know you've seen it, it's cool, but, like, so many
Mhm.
people, like, have just
Mhm.
it's a really good feminist film that, like, I feel like they're strong characters. Like, there's the
Mhm.
strong characters, like, they thought Rey was a strong character. She had, like, no obstacle in Star Wars, and it's like, yeah, but that's the problem. She's not relatable in any way. A
Mhm.
strong female character does not mean she's literally strong.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they took that idea and they were just like, she's just strong in everything. It's like, no, 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 she has to have some weakness. It's just she overcomes the weakness.
Yeah. Right.
That's a strong female character. That's a strong
Right.
character in anything, but anyways, I digress. Thank
Totally.
you so much for doing
Of
this.
course.
Great.
Thank you for
This was so
having me.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to get that phone call from you. So,
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
mean, this is cool. How can people reach you?
My Instagram is currently deactivated, but when it's reactivated, which will be by the end of this year, it's Megan X Johnson, Meagan. And yeah, I also have my website is meganxjohnson.com. That's where my portfolio is. And yeah, those are the two main ways. But
All
other than that,
right.
yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
And
you.